The Galactic Dominion had ruled the stars for 3,000 years. 12 powerful species had joined together long ago, not out of friendship but out of fear. They feared each other. They feared being alone. Most of all, they feared being weak. So they became strong together and they took what they wanted from the universe. Their method was simple. They would find a planet with good resources. They would study the creatures living there. If those creatures were weak, the Dominion would come and take everything. The water, the metals, the land. Sometimes they took the creatures too, using them as workers or soldiers. Sometimes they simply removed them to make room for Dominion colonies. In 3,000 years, they had done this to 7,840 worlds. Some of those worlds had been beautiful. Some had held civilizations that built great cities and made wonderful art. None of that mattered to the Dominion. Resources were resources. Weakness was weakness. The strong took from the weak. That was the only law that mattered in their galaxy. Admiral commanded the 7th Fleet, one of the Dominion's most powerful military forces. He was old by his species standards, with scales covering his long face and cold yellow eyes that had seen 100 worlds fall. He had never lost a battle. He had never shown mercy. These were the two facts he was most proud of. When his science officers brought him the report on a small blue planet in a quiet corner of the galaxy, he barely looked at it. The planet was called Earth by its inhabitants. It was the 3rd planet from a medium-sized yellow star. It had water, metals, and a breathable atmosphere. Most importantly, it had weak creatures living on it. The report said these creatures called themselves humans. They had only recently discovered how to leave their own planet. Their fastest ships took months to reach their nearest neighbor world. They had nuclear weapons, which were dangerous to themselves but laughable against Dominion shields. They were divided into many different nations that often fought each other. They could not even agree on how to protect their own planet from getting warmer. Admiral marked Earth as Objective 7841. Low threat, high resource value. He scheduled the conquest for 17 solar cycles from that day, just enough time to finish his current campaign and move his fleet into position. He sent a reconnaissance probe ahead to gather more detailed information. The probe was small, fast, and invisible to primitive sensors. It would watch the humans, learn their weaknesses, and send back everything the invasion force would need to know. Admiral did not think about Earth again. It was just another number on a very long list. On Earth, in a secret military facility hidden in the Nevada desert, a young man named David Park was working the night shift. He was 26 years old, a communications specialist for the United States Space Force. His job was to listen to signals from space, looking for anything unusual. Most nights there was nothing. Space was mostly quiet, filled with the natural sounds of stars and distant galaxies. David would drink coffee, check his equipment, and try not to fall asleep. It was boring work, but someone had to do it. On this particular night, David noticed something strange on his screen. There was a pattern in the background noise that should not be there. It was not random. It repeated in a very specific way, using mathematical sequences that could not be natural. David sat up straight in his chair. His heart began to beat faster. He checked his equipment 3 times to make sure it was working correctly. It was. The signal was real. He did not understand the language, if it even was a language, but the mathematics were clear. Someone or something was sending information through space, and based on the signal's direction, it was coming from something very close to Earth, something that had not been there before. David picked up his phone and called his supervisor. Within an hour, the facility was full of people. Scientists, military officers, and government officials all crowded around David's screen, watching the strange signal repeat its pattern. By morning, the report had reached General Mike at the Pentagon. General was 54 years old, a tall man with hair and a calm face that hid a sharp mind. He had fought in 3 wars and led soldiers through impossible situations, but this was something he had never faced before. The signal was definitely artificial. Something intelligent had made it, and whatever that something was, it was watching Earth. General made a decision. This information would stay secret. The public would panic if they knew aliens were real and possibly hostile. Instead, he would form a small team of the best people he could find. Their mission would be to understand the signal and figure out what to do about it. One of the first people he called was Dr. Grace. She was 41 years old, a physicist at MIT who had spent her career studying theoretical faster-than-light communication. Most of her colleagues thought her ideas were impossible. Funding agencies had rejected her proposals for years, but General had read her papers, and he thought she might be exactly what they needed. Grace arrived at the Pentagon 2 days later, confused but curious. When General showed her the signal, she almost fell out of her chair. "This is quantum-entangled communication," she said, her voice shaking with excitement. "I knew it was possible, I knew it." She looked at the General with wide eyes. "Whoever sent this has technology hundreds of years ahead of us, maybe thousands." "Can you understand it?" General asked. "Not yet," Grace admitted, "but I can learn. Give me time and resources and I can figure out how they are sending this, maybe even how to send a message back." General nodded slowly. "You have both, whatever you need." Over the next week, more people joined the team. Captain Lee came from the Air Force, a pilot and military strategist known for thinking in unusual ways. Dr. Rachel arrived from, a historian who specialized in game theory and how civilizations made decisions under pressure. Colonel Jenny transferred from the NSA, bringing her expertise in cybersecurity and code breaking. They worked in secret, hidden in an underground facility where no one would find them. They studied the alien signal day and night, slowly beginning to understand its structure. What they found was not comforting. The signal contained information about Earth, detailed information, population estimates, military capabilities, resource locations. It was a report, they realized. Someone was studying humanity the way a hunter studies prey. Dr. Rachel found something else buried in the data, a number, 7,841. It appeared in a specific location in the signal's structure, like a label or a name. "I think this is how they identify us," she said during a late-night meeting. "We are number 7,841 on some kind of list." "A list of what?" Captain Lee asked. Rachel's face was pale in the fluorescent light. "I do not know for certain, but if this is number 7,841, that means there were 7,840 before us, and I do not think those were friendly visits." The room went silent. Everyone understood what she was saying. Earth was not special. Earth was not chosen for first contact or friendship. Earth was a target, one of thousands that had come before. Somewhere out in the darkness of space, something powerful was coming, and humanity had very little time to decide what to do about it. General stood up and looked at his team. "Then we need to make that time count. Whatever is coming, we will not go quietly. Start working on a response." The stars had always seemed beautiful to humans, full of wonder and possibility. Now they knew the truth. The stars were also full of danger, and the danger was getting closer every day. 3 weeks. That was how much time Dr. Grace estimated they had before the alien fleet would arrive. 3 weeks to prepare for an enemy that had conquered thousands of worlds. 3 weeks to save humanity from becoming number 7,841 on a list of dead civilizations. The secret facility buzzed with activity at all hours. Scientists ran on coffee and fear. Military officers studied every piece of data they could find. And in the center of it all, Grace worked on her impossible project, building a device that could talk back to the stars. The alien probe used quantum-entangled particles to send its messages. This was a technology Grace had theorized about for years. The basic idea was simple. Two particles could be connected in a special way, so that whatever happened to one would instantly affect the other, no matter how far apart they were. This meant information could travel faster than light, breaking the rules that everyone thought were unbreakable. Grace had been laughed at for believing this could work. Now she held proof in her hands that it did work. The aliens had been using it for who knew how long. She did not sleep for 4 days straight. Her team built prototype after prototype, each one failing in a different way. Her eyes burned from staring at screens. Her hands shook from too much caffeine, but she refused to stop. On the 5th day at 3 in the morning, a small green light blinked on her latest device. Grace stared at it for a long moment, not believing what she was seeing. Then she began to laugh and cry at the same time. "It works," she whispered to no one. "It actually works." By sunrise, she had sent a test signal. By noon, she had confirmed that something had received it. Humanity could now talk to the aliens. The question was, what should they say? General called an emergency meeting. The small conference room was crowded with tired faces. Grace sat next to Captain Lee, who had become something like a friend during the long nights of work. Dr. Rachel had papers spread across the table, covered in notes and diagrams. Colonel Jenny watched everyone with careful eyes, always looking for details others might miss. "We have one chance," General said. "One message. Whatever we send, it needs to be perfect. If we sound weak, they will crush us. If we sound too aggressive, they might decide we are a threat worth destroying immediately. We need something that makes them hesitate." "What makes a conqueror hesitate?" Captain Lee asked. Rachel leaned forward. "Fear," she said simply. "These aliens have been doing this for 3,000 years. They have a system, a routine. They find weak planets, they take what they want, and they move on. The one thing that would make them pause is something that does not fit their expectations." "They expect us to be primitives," Colonel Jenny added. "They expect us to not even know they are coming until it is too late." "So we show them we know," Grace said slowly, understanding forming in her mind. "We show them we have been watching them too." Rachel nodded, a strange smile on her face. "Better than that, we make them think we know more than we do. We bluff." The room went quiet. Bluffing against an alien empire with thousands of years of experience seemed insane, but it was also the only option they had. "Think about it," Rachel continued. "That number in their signal, 7,841, it means we are target number 7,841, which means there were 7,840 others before us. What if we tell them we know about all of them? What if we make them wonder how we know?" Captain Lee shook his head. "They will know we are lying. How could we possibly know about their previous conquests?" "They will not know for sure," Rachel replied. "That is the point. They will ask themselves, how did these primitives intercept our probe? How did they build a quantum communicator? What else do they know that we did not expect? Doubt is our weapon. Uncertainty is our shield." General studied her for a long moment. "And if the bluff fails?" "Then we die," Rachel said calmly. "But we were going to die anyway. At least this way we have a chance." The room was silent again. Then one by one everyone nodded. They spent the next 2 days crafting the message. Every word was debated. Every implication was considered. Grace translated it into the mathematical language the aliens used, making sure it would be understood clearly. The final message was short. They decided that short was better. A confident enemy does not need many words. A species that knows its own power does not beg or explain. The message read, "We know what you are. We know what you have done to 7,840 worlds before us. We have been waiting. Come if you dare, but know that Earth remembers and Earth does not forgive." Grace's hands trembled as she prepared to send it. This was the most important communication in human history. If it worked, they might survive. If it failed, humanity would be just another number on a very long list. "Are you sure about this?" she asked General one last time. The general looked at the screen showing the distant stars. Somewhere out there, an alien fleet was moving toward Earth, carrying enough firepower to destroy everything humanity had ever built. "No," he admitted. "I am not sure, but I would rather die fighting with a clever trick than crying like a victim. Send it." Grace pressed the button. The message flew out into space, carried by particles that moved faster than light itself. Within seconds, it had traveled farther than any human technology had gone before. Across the galaxy, Admiral was reviewing reports in his command chamber when an alert sounded. One of his officers rushed in, looking confused and frightened. "Admiral, we have received a transmission from the target planet." His yellow eyes narrowed. "That is impossible. They do not have quantum communication technology. Their most advanced signals take years to travel between stars." "The signal is real, Admiral. It came through our own network. They used our protocols." For the first time in a very long time, Admiral felt something cold in his chest. It was not quite fear. He was too old and too experienced for fear, but it was close. He read the message 3 times. Each time the cold feeling grew stronger. How did they know about the 7,840 previous objectives? That information was classified at the highest level. Only the Dominion High Council had access to those records. Even himself had to request special permission to view them. Had there been a spy, a leak? Had one of the conquered species somehow survived and warned Earth? Or was there something about these humans that the reconnaissance probe had missed? Something dangerous? Ordered his fleet to stop. He needed time to think. He needed to investigate. For the first time in 3,000 years of conquest, the Dominion had encountered something that did not fit the pattern. On Earth, the team watched their screens in tense silence. Hours passed, then a day, then 2 days. The alien fleet had stopped moving. Rachel was the first to speak. "It is working, they are scared." Captain Lee shook his head in amazement. "We scared an alien empire with a message, with words." Grace allowed herself a small smile. Words can be powerful weapons, sometimes more powerful than any gun or bomb. But they all knew the truth. The danger was not over. It had only paused, and sooner or later Admiral would decide what to do next. The question was whether humanity would be ready when he did. General stood up. "Good work, everyone, but this is just the beginning. We bought ourselves time. Now we need to use it. Whatever happens next, we face it together." Outside the underground facility, the sun rose over the Nevada desert. It was a beautiful morning, warm and golden. Most people on Earth had no idea how close they had come to extinction. They went about their normal lives, unaware that somewhere in space, their fate hung in the balance. But in that hidden room, a small group of humans had done the impossible. They had made an empire hesitate, and that was the first step toward survival. The message from Earth spread through the Dominion like fire through dry grass. At first, only Admiral and his senior officers knew about it. Then the High Council learned. Then their advisors. Then their servants. Within 3 days, the story had reached every corner of the Empire. A primitive species had intercepted a Dominion probe. They had built impossible technology. They had sent a message that contained classified information. And they had done something no one else had ever done. They had made the mighty 7th Fleet stop in its tracks. In the great halls of the Dominion capital, 12 species whispered to each other in worried voices. How did the humans know? What else did they know? Were they truly as primitive as the reports suggested, or had it all been a trick? Ambassador knew nothing about any of this. He was a Korean diplomat who had worked at the United Nations for 15 years. He was known for his calm manner and his ability to find solutions when everyone else saw only problems. He had helped negotiate peace treaties, trade agreements, and humanitarian aid programs. He thought he had seen every challenge diplomacy could offer. He was wrong. When General's people contacted him, he thought it was a joke at first. Aliens, a galactic empire, a message that had stopped an invasion fleet. It sounded like a movie, not real life. But the evidence was real. The signal was real. The fear in General's eyes was real, and so became the head of Earth's newly formed Extraterrestrial Relations Council. His job was simple to explain and impossible to do. Keep the aliens talking. Keep them uncertain. Keep them from deciding that the easiest solution was to simply destroy Earth and move on to easier targets. Meanwhile, Admiral was having the worst week of his very long life. He had questioned every officer on his ship. He had executed 2 of them for suspected treason, even though they were probably innocent. He had sent urgent messages to the Dominion intelligence services, demanding to know how classified information had leaked to a primitive planet. No one had answers. The intelligence services insisted their security was perfect. The High Council demanded that continue the invasion. Other admirals mocked him for being scared of creatures who had only recently learned to fly. But was not stupid. He had not survived 3,000 years of warfare by ignoring warning signs. Something was wrong about this situation, and he needed to understand what before he risked his fleet. He ordered a full analysis of Earth's message. His best code breakers studied every symbol, every pattern, every possible hidden meaning. What they found was strange. The message was simple, too simple. It contained no real information, just a threat and a claim. But the claim about knowing 7,840 previous objectives was either a lucky guess or proof that the humans had access to secrets they should not have. Could not decide which option was more disturbing. Back on Earth, Dr. Rachel explained her gamble to the team. The number 7,841 was in their probe's data. It was a designation, a label for our planet. I assumed it was part of a sequence. If we were 7,841, then there must have been 7,840 before us. I guessed that these numbers represented previous conquests. You guessed, Captain Lee looked at her with wide eyes. Our entire survival strategy was based on a guess. Rachel shrugged. An educated guess. Their data structure suggested a cataloging system. The number fit the pattern of a sequential list. I calculated a 73% probability that I was correct. And if you were wrong, then they would have known we were bluffing and they would have killed us all. Rachel said this as calmly as if she were discussing the weather. But I was not wrong. Their reaction proves it. If we had guessed incorrectly, they would have laughed and continued their attack. Instead, they stopped. They are scared. Colonel Jenny had been working on something even more ambitious. Using the connection Grace had established, she had been probing the alien network, looking for weaknesses. What she found was better than anyone had hoped. Their security is terrible, Jenny reported during a late-night meeting. They never expected anyone to hack them, so they never built proper defenses. I have been inside their communication system for 2 days. I can read their messages. I can see their fleet movements. I know everything. General leaned forward. Tell us what you have learned. Jenny took a deep breath. The Dominion is not as strong as it appears. 12 species rule together, but they do not trust each other. They have been keeping secrets from each other for centuries. Hidden weapons programs, secret alliances, stolen resources. If this information became public, their empire would tear itself apart. The room went very quiet. You are saying we could destroy them? Grace asked slowly. Not with weapons, but with information. I am saying they have been destroying themselves slowly for 3,000 years, Jenny replied. They are held together by fear, fear of each other and fear of being alone. If we remove that fear, or if we replace it with a different kind of fear, the whole structure collapses. Captain Lee stood up and began packing. This is dangerous. If we expose their secrets, they might unite against us instead of fighting each other. We could make things worse. Or we could show them a better way, Ambassador said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. He had been silent through most of the meeting, listening and thinking. The message we sent was a threat. It made them scared. But fear is not a foundation for lasting peace. Eventually, they will overcome their fear, and then they will come for us again. What do you suggest? General asked. Thought carefully before answering. We give them a choice, not just a threat but an opportunity. We show them what they have been doing wrong, and we show them that there is another way. We make them see that we are not just dangerous enemies, we are potential allies. Why would they want us as allies? Grace asked. They have conquered thousands of worlds. What could we possibly offer them? Smiled slightly. We offer them the truth. For 3,000 years they have ruled through lies and fear. They hide from each other, spy on each other, betray each other. We show them what happens when a species chooses honesty instead. We show them what humanity is capable of when we work together. It was a bold idea, maybe even a crazy idea, but it was also the only path that did not end in endless war or certain destruction. Admiral was running out of time. The High Council was demanding action. Other fleets were being positioned nearby, ready to join or replace him depending on his decision. His reputation, his career, everything he had built over 3 was at stake. He looked at the distant blue dot on his screen. Earth. Such a small planet, such strange creatures. They should have been easy prey. Instead, they had become the biggest mystery he had ever faced. He made his decision. He would advance. He would call the humans bluff. If they truly knew Dominion's secrets, they would reveal more to save themselves. If they were lying, they would die. Either way, he would have his answer. The 7th Fleet began moving again, heading toward Earth. In the underground facility, alarms began sounding. Colonel Jenny looked up from her screen, her face pale. They are coming, she said. The fleet is moving again. We have maybe 72 hours before they reach Earth. General nodded grimly. Then we have 72 hours to change their minds. Everyone back to work. This is not over yet. The stars outside were cold and distant. Somewhere among them, an armada of warships was approaching. But in that small room, a handful of humans refused to give up hope. They had one more card to play, and they intended to play it well. Admiral watched Earth grow larger on his. The blue planet hung in the darkness like a jewel, beautiful and fragile. He had destroyed beautiful things before. He would do it again if necessary. His fleet of 300 warships entered the solar system in perfect formation. They passed the outer planets without slowing down. They ignored the primitive satellites and space stations orbiting Earth's moon. Nothing here could hurt them. Nothing here could even slow them down. Or so believed. 72 hours earlier, the team on Earth had made their final plan. It was desperate. It was dangerous. It might start an interstellar war that humanity could not win, but it was also their only chance. Dr. Grace had spent those hours working without rest. Her quantum communication device had opened a door into the Dominion network. Colonel Jenny had walked through that door and found treasures beyond imagination. Now it was time to share those treasures with the universe. They did not broadcast to Admiral's fleet. That would have been too small. Instead, they sent their message to everyone, every species in the Dominion, every ship in every fleet, every colony on every world. The message went out like a wave, unstoppable and everywhere at once. It began with Ambassador's voice, translated into every language the Dominion used. People of the Galactic Dominion, we are humanity. You came to take our world, so we learned to listen. What we heard was not what you expected us to hear. For 3,000 years, your rulers have kept secrets. They have lied to you. They have stolen from you. They have turned you against each other so that you would not turn against them. Today, those secrets end. Then came the evidence, documents, recordings, communications between leaders. Everything Jenny had found in the Dominion network was now visible to everyone. The first revelation showed that the ruling council of one species had secretly destroyed a colony belonging to another species, then blamed it on a third. The attack had started a war that killed millions. Both sides had been fighting a lie for 200 years. The second revelation showed hidden weapons programs. 3 species had been building planet-destroying bombs in secret, pointing them at their own allies just in case they needed to betray them someday. The third revelation was financial. Resources that were supposed to be shared equally among all Dominion members had been secretly hoarded by a few. Entire species were kept poor and weak on purpose, so they could never challenge the powerful. There was more, so much more. Centuries of lies and betrayals, all exposed in a single broadcast that no one could ignore or deny. Admiral watched his communication screens explode with chaos. Officers were shouting. Different species on his own ships were looking at each other with new suspicion. Some were crying. Some were angry. Some simply stared in shock at things they had never imagined could be true. His fleet began to fall apart before his eyes. 3 ships from one species turned and flew away, refusing to fight alongside those who had betrayed them. Then 5 more left. Then 8. Arguments broke out on bridge after bridge. Old grudges that had been buried for centuries suddenly came back to life. On Earth, the team watched this happen through Jenny's connection to the Dominion network. Grace held her breath. Rachel gripped the edge of the table. Captain Lee paced back and forth, unable to stand still. Ambassador remained calm. He had one more thing to say. His voice returned to the broadcast, still gentle, still steady. We are not your enemy. We are your mirror. We have shown you what you have become. Look at it. Look at the fear and the lies and the endless betrayal. Is this what you want to be? Is this why your ancestors first looked up at the stars? He paused, letting the words sink in across 1,000 worlds. The Dominion does not conquer planets, it conquers itself. Every lie makes you weaker. Every betrayal makes you more alone. Every secret is a chain that keeps you trapped. You have spent 3,000 years being afraid of each other. We offer you something different. We offer you truth. We offer you the chance to become what you could have been if you had chosen trust instead of fear. Your fleet sits at our doorstep. We cannot stop it. We have no weapons that can match yours. If you choose to destroy us, you will succeed. But before you do, ask yourself, what have we shown you today? We have shown you that a species can survive by being clever instead of cruel, by being honest instead of hidden, by working together even when we are small and weak and afraid. This is our gift to you, not a weapon, not a threat, a truth. What you do with it is your choice. The broadcast ended. Silence fell across the galaxy. Admiral stood alone on his command bridge. Most of his officers had left to deal with the chaos spreading through the fleet. Half his ships were gone. The other half were barely functioning, crews divided by species and by anger. He could still attack Earth. He had enough firepower left to burn the planet down to its core. No one would stop him. No one could stop him. But what would that prove? That he was strong. He had always been strong. That had never been in question. The humans had done something he had never encountered in 3,000 years of war. They had won without fighting. They had destroyed the Dominion without firing a single shot. They had taken every secret weapon his empire had built and turned it into dust. He should hate them. Part of him did hate them. But another part, a part he had forgotten existed, felt something else entirely. Respect made his decision. He ordered his remaining ships to hold position. No attack, no retreat, just waiting. On Earth, the team saw this happen and did not know what it meant. Were the aliens preparing a new strategy? Were they waiting for reinforcements? Or had they actually listened? The answer came 12 hours later. A small shuttle left Admiral's flagship and flew toward Earth. It carried no weapons. It sent no threats. Instead, it sent a single message. "We wish to talk." Ambassador smiled for the first time in weeks. "Then we will talk." The shuttle landed in the Nevada desert under heavy guard. Admiral stepped out alone, his old scales dusty from the journey. He looked at the small group of humans waiting for him and saw no fear in their eyes, only patience, only hope. "You have destroyed my empire," said. It was not an accusation, just a fact. "We showed your empire the truth," replied. "What happens next is up to all of you." Was quiet for a long moment. Then he did something that no one had ever seen him do. He laughed. It was a rough, bitter sound, but it was real. 3,000 years, he said. 3,000 years of conquest, and we are brought low by a planet of creatures who still argue about the weather. Perhaps there is something to learn from you after all. Perhaps there is, agreed. But learning requires listening. Are you willing to listen, Admiral? Looked up at the Earth's blue sky, so different from the dark space he had known all his life. He thought about the chaos spreading through the Dominion. He thought about the lies he had believed and the truths he had ignored. "Yes," he said finally, "I am willing to listen." And so, in a dusty desert on a small blue planet, the first real conversation between humanity and the stars began. Not with weapons or threats, but with words and hope. It was only the beginning. But sometimes, the beginning is everything. 1 year had passed since the day that changed everything. Earth was no longer Objective 7841. It was no longer a target or a resource to be taken. Instead, it had become something no one had expected, a meeting place for the galaxy. The Dominion had not survived. How could it? The truth had spread too far, touched too many hearts, awakened too much anger. Within weeks of the broadcast, the 12 ruling species had broken apart. Wars erupted on 100 worlds as old lies finally demanded payment. Governments fell. Leaders were removed. The empire that had stood for 3,000 years crumbled like a building with no foundation. But from the ashes, something new began to grow. General Mike stood on the observation deck of humanity's first interstellar embassy. It floated in orbit above the Pacific Ocean, a gleaming structure of metal and glass that had been built in just 8 months. Ships from 9 different species were docked at its ports. Creatures that had been enemies for centuries now walked the same halls, ate in the same dining rooms, argued in the same conference chambers. It was messy, it was difficult, sometimes it was even dangerous, but it was also hope. Was not a young man anymore. The stress of the past year had added more to his hair and more lines to his face. But when he looked out at the stars, he felt something he had not felt since he was a boy first dreaming of space: wonder. Quite a view, is it not? He turned to see Dr. Grace approaching. She looked different than she had a year ago, more confident, more at peace. The scientist who had been ridiculed for her impossible ideas was now famous across multiple star systems. Her work on quantum communication had opened doors that had been closed for. "How was the ceremony?" asked. Grace smiled. "Strange. I received 4 different awards, each one from a species that would have happily destroyed us 12 months ago. One of them tried to give me a medal made of compressed carbon from their home star. Another gave me a living crystal that sings when you touch it. And the Nobel Prize? That one just came with a check," she laughed softly. "I spent my acceptance speech talking about my graduate students. They deserved the credit more than I did." Down in the embassy's main hall, Ambassador was meeting with representatives from what used to be the Dominion. The conversations were never easy. 3,000 years of distrust could not be erased in 12 months, but slowly, carefully, they were making progress. A trade agreement here, a cultural exchange there, small steps that might someday lead to something bigger, was patient. He had learned long ago that real change takes time. The important thing was to keep moving forward even when the path was hard. Dr. Rachel had become something of a celebrity. Her book about the crisis, The Bluff That Saved the World, had been translated into 37 languages, including 5 alien ones. She spent most of her time now giving lectures at universities around the world and beyond. People always asked her the same question. Did she really just guess about the 7,840 previous conquests? She always gave the same answer. It was not a guess. It was a calculated risk based on pattern recognition and probability analysis. Then she would pause and smile. But yes, also a little bit of a guess. Sometimes you have to trust your instincts. Captain Lee and Colonel Jenny had taken on a new mission. They commanded Earth's first deep space exploration vessel, a ship called the Remembrance. Their job was to find the worlds the Dominion had destroyed and learn their stories. It was heartbreaking work. They visited dead planets where entire civilizations had been erased. They found ruins of cities that had once held millions of lives. They collected artifacts, recorded histories, and tried to give voices to those who had been silenced. "Someone has to remember them," had said when he accepted the assignment. "If we forget what happened, it might happen again." Jenny agreed. Her skills at gathering information had helped save humanity. Now she used those same skills to uncover the truth about species that had not been so lucky. Every world they visited added to a growing memorial that humanity was building in their honor. Admiral had returned to space, but not as a conqueror. The Dominion no longer existed, and neither did his fleet. He commanded a small ship now, traveling between worlds as a kind of wandering diplomat. His job was to help former enemies learn to talk to each other. He was surprisingly good at it. Perhaps because he had spent so long being feared, he understood fear better than most. He knew how to calm angry hearts and quiet suspicious minds. He knew that the first step toward peace was admitting that war had cost too much. Sometimes he thought about Earth and the strange creatures who had beaten him without ever firing a weapon. He had expected to hate them. Instead, he found himself admiring them. They had shown him a different way to be strong, not through power but through wisdom, not through conquest but through connection. The galaxy was still dangerous. Old habits died hard, and not everyone was ready to embrace the new way. There were wars still being fought in distant corners of space. There were leaders who dreamed of rebuilding the old empire under new management. The future was uncertain, as futures always are. But on Earth, people looked up at the night sky and saw something they had never seen before: friends. The stars were no longer just points of light. They were places where other beings lived and dreamed and struggled with the same questions that humanity had always faced. What does it mean to be good? How do we live together without destroying each other? What kind of future do we want to build? One evening, a year to the day after the crisis had begun, Ambassador stood before the newly formed Galactic Council. Representatives from dozens of species filled the chamber. Some had been enemies for centuries. Some had never met before. All of them were watching the human at the podium, waiting to hear what he would say. Looked out at the assembled faces, so different from each other, so full of hope and fear and uncertainty. He took a deep breath and began to speak. "1 year ago, your fleets came to our world. You came to take our resources and remove our people. You expected to find primitives, easy prey, another number on a very long list." He paused, letting his words settle over the crowd. "Instead, you found something different. Not warriors, not weapons. You found a species that refuses to be afraid, a species that knows weakness can become strength, a species that believes the answer to fear is not more fear but understanding." He spread his hands, taking in the whole chamber. "You came to harvest us. We chose instead to plant seeds, seeds of truth, seeds of hope, seeds of a future where being strong does not mean making others weak." His voice grew quieter, but no less powerful. "Earth is open. The stars are open. We have shown you what happens when 12 species spend 3,000 years lying to each other. Now let us see what happens when we try something different. Let us see what we can build together, with honesty as our foundation and trust as our goal." He smiled, a gentle expression that somehow filled the room. "It will not be easy. We will disagree. We will argue. We will make mistakes. But we will also learn. We will grow. We will become more than any of us could be alone." The chamber was silent. Then slowly someone began to clap, then another, then hundreds. Stepped back from the podium, his heart full. Behind him, through the great windows of the council chamber, the stars shone bright and cold and full of possibility. The galaxy had marked Earth as its next objective. Earth had marked the galaxy as its first opportunity. And humanity, as it always had, reached upward toward the light.